is Shreemayee and I'm a freelance writer from Mumbai, India. Thank you so much for having me as a part of the International Agatha Christie Festival. It's such a great honor for me to be here today. I grew up reading Agatha Christie's novels and I'm so excited to be talking to you today about what I call the romance novels of Agatha Christie. That is, the 6 novels that she wrote under the pseudonym Mary Westmacott. I discovered the Mary Westmacott novels when I was about 13 years old. My mother had got a book home from the library, which was this massive book called The Collected Works of Mary Westmacott, and it had all 6 novels in one. I read them all in a hurry because we had to return the book to the library in 7 days. So I essentially read all 6 novels in just 1 week. I remember loving them. They were so different from all the other Agatha Christie books I had read so far, all the Poirots and Miss Marples and Parker Pine and everybody else. And while I loved all of them too, this was so different and so refreshing and so moving that I just remember being amazed at how good and how thrilling it was. I also asked around a lot of people to see if they had read the Mary Westmacott novels, but unfortunately I didn't find too many people. They were not very popular, at least in the area that I was growing up in. Cut to 2020, when the pandemic had started and we were in lockdown. We were at home for many, many months. And I took up a personal reading project at that point of time. The project was very simple. It was just that I was going to be reading all the Agatha Christie books chronologically in the order that they were published. I decided to keep the Mary Westmacott novels as a part of this project, and so I read them along with all the other Agatha Christie detective novels. It was now in 2020, when I was much, much older, obviously, that I realized and I rediscovered the Mary Westmacott works, and I realized how great they actually are and how well they fit into the Agatha Christie universe of the detective stories of crime and murder and passion that we usually talk about. So today I'm going to talk about the 6 books that she wrote under the Mary Westmacott name, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to understand her work and to understand her philosophy. It is important to take these 6 novels and read them along with her detective stories. Mary Westmacott was a pseudonym that Agatha Christie created for herself when she started writing books of a different genre. The reason for this was very simple. She didn't want these books to be associated with the detective novels. She didn't want them to face the pressure and the hype that came with being a successful novelist. By 1930, when she published the first of the Mary Westmacott novels, she was already known as a writer of detective fiction. Poirot was already famous and popular, and this was genre-breaking for her. This is something that we still see in literature, most notably recently with J.K. Rowling, for example, when after the Harry Potter books became so massively popular and she wanted to stop writing fantasy fiction, she moved to detective fiction, in fact, and she started writing under the name Robert Galbraith, mostly again to avoid the censure and to avoid the hype that comes with being such a popular author. The name Mary Westmacott was chosen very simply because Mary was Agatha Christie's middle name and Westmacott was a surname of some distant relatives. In classic Agatha Christie style, she held on to that name and that pseudonym for many, many years. It was almost 20 years before the public found out that Mary Westmacott and Agatha Christie were the same. In that sense, Agatha Christie wrote 6 novels under the name Mary Westmacott. The first was Giant's Bread in 1930. The last was The Burden in 1956. All of them have for themselves a theme of love. And it is this love that is overarching and that sets it apart from all her other books. It is interesting that she wants to explore love because Agatha Christie, as a writer of crime, does not look at love in a hunky-dory fashion as is portrayed in our movies and in our pop culture. She realizes the terrible aspect of love. She realizes how love can prompt us human beings to do some horrible things. She realizes that love can lead to envy, bitterness, passion, jealousy, hatred, you name it, and it's there. Love is often a motive of crime in her detective novels as well. So I think that gives us a sense of how Agatha Christie viewed love and how she realized the potential of love to turn into something almost evil in its ferociousness. She says this in multiple places in her books. For example, in Death on the Nile, she says love can be a very frightening thing. That's why most great love stories are tragedies. In Crooked House, she says, I think people more often kill those they love than those they hate. Probably because only the people you love can really make life unendurable to you. In her autobiography, she goes on to say, but surely for everything you love, you have to pay some price. It is this price of love that she sets out to explore in the 6 Mary Westmacott novels. Giant's Bread was the first novel that Agatha Christie wrote under the name Mary Westmacott. It was published in 1930, and the story of the novel basically it follows the life of a musical genius called Vernon Dyer, and Mary Westmacott or Agatha Christie tries to explore different relationships in his life. There is the romantic relationships that he has with Nell and with Jane. There is the relationship that he shares with his mother. There is the relationship that he shares with music itself. And how all of them are extremely passionate and all of them are extremely complicated. Set before the First World War and during the First World War as well, the novel encapsulates some of the most pressing concerns of British life in that time, and it is set like some of her early works in old British country houses. It is the British country house novel like The Mysterious Affair at Styles and Curtain. It also deals with the loss of the familiar world as people knew it after the First World War. These are themes that Christie explores in her detective novels as well. The ferociousness of love, the complications of love, the mother figure and the role that she plays in the life of her children. It is there in The Mysterious Affair of Styles, very notably, where the Inglethorpes are sort of dominated by the matriarch, Emily Inglethorpe. It's there in Appointment with Death, which is also about the family under a very domineering and strict matriarch, Mrs. Boynton. It's also there in one of the other Mary Westmacott novels that I will be talking about, Absent in the Spring, which came out a little later. Her next novel under Mary Westmacott was in 1934 and was called Unfinished Portrait. Unfinished Portrait is about a woman called Celia who's about to take her own life. And just as she's contemplating suicide, she meets the narrator of the story and she looks back and introspects on all the events of her life, the relationships that she's had, and of course her marriage. It is believed that this story is in a way semi-autobiographical, and the thoughts that Celia has are representative of what Christie was feeling herself after her first husband left her, because that was a very tempestuous period for her as well. We don't know if that is the case because she has never said as much, but while reading the story, it is obvious that the story wants to explore the consequences of the loss of love and what human beings are driven to do because they have lost the love that they want or they feel that they deserve. Christie wants to show what happens when love is denied to us and what human beings go through at that point. It reminds me of Five Little Pigs, a book that she wrote many years after Unfinished Portrait. In fact, it was published in 1942. But the central Crime and Five Little Pigs is about the psychological damage or psychological impact on Elsa when she realizes that she has lost the love that was shaping her life in a way. Going to the next Mary Westmacott novel, it's Absent in the Spring, which released in 1944. Absent in the Spring is one of my favorite Mary Westmacott novels, and Christie has had also famously said that it was one of her favorites. It was as close to perfection as she could imagine it to be, and she wrote it in one go in just about 3 days. She said that if she looked back at it, there would be not a word that she would like to change in that novel. And really, when you're reading Absent in the Spring, you realize how perfect the novel is. It's set in the desert where a woman is stranded on her way back to England from Baghdad. She doesn't have any family with her. She's all alone, waiting for the next train to travel. And because she's all alone and she has nothing to do, she starts thinking about her life, which she has tried to avoid for so many years. She thinks about her life, she thinks about her relationships, and she thinks that while all her actions and words have stemmed from love, or what she believes is love, it has stifled those around her. It has stifled her relationships, it has stifled the independence of her children and her husband. And now she finds herself alone and lonely. Everybody else seems to have moved on without her. These are not things that she can accept. She is not somebody who likes to believe that she has struggled or that she has in any way caused harm, or in any way that she is not as perfect as she believes herself to be. But these are all startling revelations, and Christie in a way tries to tell us that all our actions have consequences that we can't even predict, even those that are motivated by pure love as we believe it. Because Christie believes that love can be evil, and because love can also be ferocious, it can lead to a lot of passionate actions, sometimes we don't realize that our consequences born of love can have negative influences on others. The negative influence of love is what really excites Christie in all these novels, I feel, because that is the one common thread in all of them. She tries to say that love is not uncomplicated. There is nothing called a happily ever after, because even with great love, there are always compromises. This is proved in the book The Rose and Yew Tree, which she also wrote under the Mary Westmacott novel. It was published in early 1948. It talks about a couple in love, Gabriel and Isabella, and it's told from the point of view of Hugh, a soldier who's come back and is injured. Because he is injured and because he is an invalid of sorts, people come to him and confide in him. They tell him their deepest, darkest secrets and what they feel about people and what they are thinking at the time. The book not only shows how complicated love can be, even after both sides are equally invested in the love, and even after it leads to the traditional happily ever after, which is the marriage. It doesn't solve all problems. There are still problems, there are still complications. The Rose and Yew Tree also notably talks about the growing class concerns in Britain post the World Wars. This is something that is not just there in The Rose and Yew Tree, but in multiple Christie novels. For example, in a bunch of Miss Marple novels, there is the idea of people coming into St. Mary's Net and building their houses. There's something called the development area where people from outside are allowed to come and live. There's a lot of talk of the aristocracy losing some of their influence and property, and more mercantile classes gaining favor and money and success. The Rose and Yew Tree is a love story of two people who are not from the same class. Societal pressures they face so many societal pressures that it's not possible for the love to remain sacrosanct after that. It is something that they have to struggle towards, it is something they have to work towards. And Christie tries to show that love is never perfect. It is not something that happens without any obstacles. It's not something that's seamless and something that can go on naturally. In fact, it is something that is very much dependent on external circumstances. It is something that is that is shaped by those around us and shaped by our own experiences as well. The next Mary Westmacott novel came out in 1952. It was called A Daughter's a Daughter. Very simply, the main focus of this novel is a mother-daughter relationship between Anne and Sarah. When Anne wants to remarry, she is stopped by Sarah, who doesn't want her to marry the person that she has chosen. You would think, and the novel also suggests that Anne does this because she values Sarah more than anything else, and she doesn't want to make a decision that would make Sarah unhappy. But eventually, this one decision causes so much resentment and bitterness in the relationship that their entire life is affected and is upended for it. Again, Christie here tries to show how love can cause resentment, how it can cause bitterness. Again, a well-meaning action born out of love doesn't always have the impact and effects that we think it can have. Every decision in the book is born out of a deep desire to please someone that they love. It's born out of deep love that they feel for each other, and even then they are unhappy, and the love that they feel cannot compensate for the unhappiness, the personal unhappiness that they are also going through. And finally, in 1956, Agatha Christie wrote The Burden under the name Mary Westmacott. The Burden talks of two sisters, Laura and Shirley, who again feel so much love for each other that all their relationships are affected by this love, and it sort of takes them on a path that is extremely murky. The burden here is actually the love that they feel for each other, and the burden is what love, what we are expected to do out of love, or what we feel we owe someone because they love us. The last couple of novels, A Daughter's a Daughter and The Burden, are interesting to me because of the family dynamics that they portray. Family is a very important part of Christie's novels. A lot of her detective stories as well are centered around different families. And they talk about the different relationships that family members have. It could be a love-hate relationship. In a lot of cases, of course, the relationship is also motivated by a desire for more money and greed, in a sense. Yet, in spite of all of that, in a way, the affection or the love that we feel for our family is something that is there throughout Christie's novels, whether it is in Mysterious Affair at Styles, which is, as I mentioned previously, a country house novel set amongst one family, right down to books like Appointment with Death, Dumb Witness, A Pocket Full of Rye, where the crime again is centered around one family, where familiar relationships influence each motive of the crime. Coming back to Absent in the Spring, one of the interesting things about Absent in the Spring that I noticed, and again something similar that Christie has explored in a lot of her detective novels, is the use of flashback. In Absent in the Spring, Joan finds herself stranded in the desert, but she looks back at events that have happened years earlier, sometimes decades earlier. The use of flashback is something that Christie was really fascinated by if you read her detective novels, because there are so many of them where the whole idea of memory plays such an important role. How human beings look back at certain events, how they suppress certain ideas and certain conversations, how memory plays such an insidious role in our lives that we almost don't even think about it, is something that she has explored time and again. In Five Little Pigs, for example, Poirot solves a crime that had happened almost 15 to 20 years earlier, and he can do it only with the help of testimonies of people who are present there. The testimonies are affected by memory. People don't remember the same things always. They choose to remember different things, and they choose to remember things that they feel were important. It is colored by their own experience, own perspectives, own likes, dislikes, and everything else that has happened to them in the interim between the actual event and when they are sharing the story. This is something that has also been explored by Christie in Elephants Can Remember, again a Poirot novel with Mrs. Oliver as well. It is something that Miss Marple has also explored in Sleeping Murder, the last of the published Christie books, even though it was written much earlier. In Sleeping Murder, Miss Marple meets a young couple who is plagued by some memories that the wife is going through. And again, it is a reconstruction of a crime scene that had happened decades earlier. Absence in the Spring is similar because the central idea is of looking back at events that have happened and seeing how life could have been even different if certain decisions were taken differently. You never know how things would have gone there. So that brings us to the end of the 6 Mary Westmacott novels. As I've said, it's extremely important to read all of them along with the detective stories to understand how Christie thought of human beings. She thought of them as complicated people. She didn't think that love was the solution for all our problems as rom-coms and popular culture would have us believe. She realized that human beings are extremely complicated creatures, especially with so many different relationships that they have, and each relationship affects our lives in so many different ways. It is this that she tried to show in the novels. It is, of course, explored in the detective novels, and it comes up in all her books in one way or the other. But because the detective novels have their own formula to follow, it has to be fast, it has to be thrilling. We have to know who committed the murder ultimately. That these themes are not explored at the length and detail that they really deserve, and that I feel Agatha Christie realized that. I feel that she realized that she had so much more to say about all of these ideas, and that they could not be explored in the formulaic detective novels. It is because of this that all these ideas come in 6 books, which are not detective stories. They are dramas, and sometimes they are tragedies as well. But all of them, and especially because I read all these novels one after the other, I realized how similar they are. The style of writing is so similar. They are fast-paced, they are thrilling, you want to know what happens next. It's almost impossible to stop reading them midway. You just want to keep turning the page. So her style is still very similar, and the themes are still very similar, even though the setting is completely different. I hope that this talk interests you in some of the Mary Westmacott novels, and I hope you go back and you read some of them, and I hope you can connect them to your favorite detective novels as well, your favorite Poirots and your favorite Miss Marples, to realize how similar they are, and to get a sense of the worldview that Agatha Christie really wanted us to have, or really wanted to share with us. Thank you, and I hope you like it all.